Welcome to this beginner-friendly Fusion in Resolve 17 tutorial. I want to build this surveillance camera effect and use this little project to show you how you can really efficiently combine edit page effects and fusion effects in Resolve 17. So I will start from the edit page. I will explain you how I conceptually build this effect, how I do some very simple things that editors can do. And then I show you how I build on this and enhance this with fusion effects. If you have never touched Fusion before, I suggest you take this tutorial only to get some ideas and concepts, but you may want to look at my website at the free beginner course that I'm offering, where I really go patiently, step by step, explain the interface in detail and lay a more solid foundation than can be done in a YouTube tutorial. However, if you have a little bit of experience and want to follow along with me, download the video footage and solution files from my website. You find everything in the links below this video and you can just download the package and follow along. If you have a lot of experience with Fusion, sorry, this tutorial will be boring, but who knows, maybe you'll still find something interesting. Topics of this tutorial: I will start from the edit page and build a very quick prototype. Then I go into different Fusion topics. I will do a little bit of keying, a bit of work with title text animations, and a bit of graphics with the new shape tools in DaVinci Resolve 17. So all of this to build up this surveillance camera effect. Let's dive in. So here is my clip in the edit, and one thing I notice right away is that the clip is shaking a bit, so this camera is not static, but if it's a surveillance camera, supposedly it's not shaking. So there are lots of places where you can do stabilization. There are functions for this in the color page. There are stabilization options in Fusion, multiple actually, but for some very simple basic stabilization, the edit page effect may already be enough. So let me try this first. So there's a stabilization function here in the edit page video effects, and I want a camera lock. So I don't want stable movement from beginning to end, but I want it locked. Now there aren't really much more options. Well, you can still choose something here, but you cannot choose, for example, on which frame it should be stabilized or how the edges are being handled. So it's limited, but sometimes limited is all that we need. And let's see. So it automatically zoomed in, and I think for this clip, it's not perfect. There are still some minor issues on the sides, but I think for this clip it looks good enough. Now let me first think about, I want this kind of overlay where all the people are being highlighted, identified, and one way to start from is just to look into the edit effects and see if there's something that looks somewhat similar, at least to get an idea. So there are, for example, these fusion effects here, which you can preview, and you can check if maybe a digital glitch, no, that doesn't look like it, perhaps night vision, so you can get an idea if there's maybe something here. Or in the Resolve effects, for example, let's have a look at this false color. It's one of the new effects, I believe, that came into the edit page. Now this looks like not exactly what I want, but it looks like something that gives me an idea of what I want. So I will just drag this clip on. Now these Resolve FX under the OpenFX category, you find many of these in Fusion as well if you need to refine them, work with them, but you can't take them like directly from Resolve to Fusion because it's a different effects methodology. These are like plugins from the Resolve color page, whereas other effects are natively built in Fusion. But I may not actually want to use this exact effect, but it does a very good preview and can tell me maybe a few things about this clip. I don't want like this heat distribution. Let me go into the effect here under Effects, OpenFX, and first of all, let me disable this scale here, which I don't need. And then this effect is usually used for some analysis purposes, like to color certain ranges of luminance or other things. Let me use it for creative purposes, and maybe the word creative suggests something I might want to do. Let's see, different styles. Let's try this low and high clip. And I don't want so many colors. Actually, I want just one highlighting color, but I think this is starting to get in the right direction because I want to color all the people, and they seem to have They're mostly dark, not all of them, but mostly dark, especially compared to the floor. So that's why I think maybe a low and high separation is somewhat working. Let's see. Here in the pre-processing, I want to get the darker people separated from the brighter ground. So maybe if I bring the black level up a bit, yeah, that seems to work. So that looks pretty good. Now if I go too far, everything gets darker. Maybe I can counteract this somehow. Okay, so not a perfect result, and there are some issues here, but you can imagine that with a little bit of fixing some additional masks and so on in Fusion, such a separation could work out quite well. Now again, this effect is not directly a Fusion effect, but the separation I'm doing here is basically a luminance separation, and that I can do with lots of different tools. So I have an idea how I can start from there or achieve a similar effect with very simple means, probably a luma keyer. I do want a scanning effect for this camera. You know, my AI-powered surveillance camera is finding the people and then identifying them and so on. So for the scanning effect, I will just start with a simple image wipe. It could be a simple transition effect. Let me put this in. I somewhere cut this clip and remove the effect from the first part. So from the first clip, I'll just delete the effect, and on the second one it remains. So by cutting the clip, I can separate out my effects, and I can use a simple video transition. We could use a dissolve or actually I want to use a wipe. Where is it? Well, I actually have a preset here. There's this edge wipe. So this one here. It's a wipe transition here. This one is the same. Yeah. So you just, if it doesn't go from left to right, then you have the transition effects where you can decide how long it should be and whether it goes from top to bottom or from left to right, or how many frames, etc., etc. So let me just leave this in, and now I have my original picture and then this kind of false color image. So that's the basic idea for this false color and wipe transition. I want a camera overlay now to have like the display elements of the camera, the recording symbol, timecode, stuff like this. There are a few of those pre-built in the Fusion Effects section. So for example, there's here this drone overlay or DSLR and so on. And maybe I just take the simple video camera here as an overlay. Now I could drag this again onto the clip, but now this time I want the same effect on both clips, including my transition. So I want this like from beginning to end. And the way to do this is just to add an adjustment clip over the whole length of the clip. Adjustment clips in Resolve are just clips that you can layer on top of whatever you have underneath, and whatever effect you do on this clip, including like edit page transforms or so, they just apply to everything underneath. So that's a quite simple and convenient concept. And here by adding this adjustment clip, I can now put this, let's say this video camera effect, and just throw it into the adjustment clip. And this is a Fusion effect. I will enhance it in Fusion, but it works now across this transition. Let me directly do a few adjustments. So this whole clip is relatively bright, so I think I will go for the overlay color. I will go to black. There is a time code here. Let's see, it starts at 47 minutes. Okay, fine, whatever. If you want, you can here have this offset control to change this, and you can change the frames per second, but 30 is, I think, correct. You have a few adjustments, but not really a lot, so that's already it. For example, this battery symbol I probably don't want for a surveillance camera, so I need to get rid of this, and I want to do some additional additions to this overlay, which I will do in a minute. But first, let me finish the preparation. We have the camera overlay, the camera scanning for the people. Now let's say the camera identified someone. Let's say maybe this guy here. He's in the middle and is, I think, visible till the end. Yeah. So then once we have him identified, we want some text box where it says who that guy is. And this I can create with a simple text effect to start from. If you want, you could go through this title section and see if there's anything that is useful that you could adjust. These are great for titles. I don't think there's any like really good box or so with like different levels of information, but it's also not difficult to build from scratch. So I will just build it from scratch with a Fusion title, but I can very easily build it from the edit page and then later do a few enhancements to it. So I will just put this somewhere here. Custom title is not the word, so I don't know, let's give him some name. It's record Adobe user. So I don't know, just write in some bullshit. And you can do quite a lot of things here actually. You can align pretty much arbitrarily like this, and you can align top and bottom, and change character spacing, and there's quite a lot. There are different layout options here. You have the control on the interface now. So that works by enabling here the Fusion overlay. So if you enable the Fusion overlay, you can move this around. You can also do alignment with tabs, which is quite useful sometimes, and very simple trick. And you can do this directly from the edit page. It is a Fusion feature, but you can do it directly from the edit page. So I can add tabs before the elements that I want to align, let's say in the beginning, and then I put another tab before here the values in the second part of this line. And now I have added 2 tab characters, and you actually see them here. You see these green lines which you can move around. So now I basically have 2 columns which I can move around, and in the tab spacing I can further adjust them, or I can adjust them even here by clicking on, if I click on the symbol on top, I have the alignment, left alignment, right center, which down here is actually this alignment slider here. So I can do it also in the slider. It goes from left to right alignment or center alignment. I don't think you want in between, but technically you could. Let's align this to the right and tab number 2 to the left. And let me reset the position for a second. Just by double clicking you can reset values. And my tabs are a bit far away. Let me bring them to 0 for the center. So 0 is the center position. And then you can, bring, maybe if you want to do it like symmetrically, you could bring, for example, this a bit over. Or maybe because the text is shorter here, I might align it somewhat like this. Okay. More ideas here. The shading tab is very useful. So you can have different levels of shading. So there are shading elements. By default, you just have the first one enabled. If you enable the second one, you see certain default settings of shading which are just added. So there are multiple layers of shading which are just added to the text. Very simple concept. You can just see what happens by default with the different levels. So by default, there's the second one uses the outline function, and then the third one uses a shadow, but this is basically custom. I could also stick to the second one, and let's say, let's not do a red outline. Let's say we want to do a box, and this name has no impact. It's just for you to remember. And I use here this fill thing, border fill, and now it's making like boxes around each character. But instead of character, I can also make a box around the text by text level, and maybe change the color to something more pleasant, to some blue. By the way, these swatches here, they are available in the edit page and in Fusion, so you could decide on one blue tone and use it everywhere. So even if you customize it, you could just drag it in here. For example, now I have a blue tone just dragged into these custom colors, and I can use later the exact same blue tone even in the Fusion page for other effects if I want to align anything. So just as an idea. I can extend the box to cover really everything and give a little bit of space below and on top, and perhaps give it round corners like this. And again, I still have my Fusion control, so I can still position it. And I could add more elements, for example, for an outline or other ideas. So you see there's a lot you can do directly from the edit page without even opening Fusion, which is great for editors and great for quick prototyping such effects, and working with your layers in the edit page where you retime things very, very quickly and can add effects, delete effects, which is like super simple without building anything custom. But now I go to Fusion in order to really enhance and polish this. And I start in the same way I did before with my colorful identification of the people here. So I will just disable those tracks and start from this clip, and I will build this from scratch. So I will not use this effect because I want to do some things that this default OpenFX effect won't give me. So let me delete this. It was a good idea to get a feeling of where my effect may go, to time things, but now I go over into Fusion, and I could go directly just click on Fusion, but in this case I have also done video effects. I have done the stabilization. Now what is important to know here is that by default Fusion effects are being executed before the video effects, the edit page effects are being executed by default. But here it's important, I want it the other way around. I want the video effect being applied first, I want the stabilization applied, and then do a fusion effect on top of the stabilized clip. And there's a simple way for this. You can just right click and say new fusion clip. And this is basically the same as very similar to a compound clip. In this case, it's actually the same, but it creates a fusion clip which encapsulates, like a compound clip, encapsulates what happened in the timeline before I am going to Fusion. Often it's used to combine multiple timeline layers together so that you get multiple layers in Fusion, but here I'm just using it to encapsulate my transition effect. So this fusion effect now doesn't have stabilization or anything. It doesn't have any video effects. It's encapsulated inside, which you could see by open in timeline. But now if I go to Fusion, I go into Fusion on top of this where I have the stabilized clip. And on this clip, I want to build this layout, and I will use a little bit of keying for this. Actually, this effect that we have seen before with the low and high clip is doing something similar. In Fusion, you have the Luma keyer. You find your effects from the effects library again, and you can search, for example, or you find keying sections under the tools where you have all the Fusion tools, of course, and you can drag and drop it in. In Fusion, you have in the default layout 2 viewers, and whatever you want to see, you can just drag and drop into the viewer or see the buttons underneath to see where they're being displayed. So this way you can enable or disable viewers. Let me bring the Luma key in. Buttons 1 and 2 on the keyboard do the same. So just some quick notes for those of you who are relatively new here. But again, if you are really doing this for the first time, you may want to watch a step-by-step training as well, free of charge on my website. But let me quickly progress here. So this is a keyer, and you see a checkerboard underneath, which will come through as I do the low and high clip basically here with this keyer. And right now I'm making the people transparent and not the background, so I need to invert this. So now the background becomes transparent, and the way I want to use this, I want to color the people. So I will create a new color, a new background node, and set this to blue. I have here a blue background. I can see the background like this, for example, and I can just attach my key as a mask to the background and then merge the background over my media in. So in Fusion, we have these merge nodes, which are basically the way how we layer things in Fusion, right? So this merge node is now merging the background, which has now the holes in due to the mask. So I first masked, and then I'm merging that background over the media in. And this is the methodology in Fusion. If you know the nodes in the color page, in the color page you have nodes where every node has all the features of the color page, and every effect you want can be put into the node. In Fusion, every node represents a functionality that is being executed. So I have a media in node, which represents get the media from the edit page in this case. Then I have a Luma key which says, okay, take this signal from the media and do a key on it. Then I have a background node which says generate a background with a mask. Blue is the mask, the blue input, which says, okay, mask out something from this background, and then I merge, and green merges over yellow. So these are the inputs of the merge node, and it says layer whatever is coming from here on top, what's coming through the green input on top of the yellow input. And why I'm mentioning this here in a bit more detail is to highlight again, also for those who are familiar with Fusion, the conceptual difference and why this is an advantage for Fusion. So in color, we usually have nodes for to logically separate out certain ideas we want to do on the image, like do some pre-grade, do some balancing, do some creative look, and often we can separate this out with nodes. Here we have technical processing steps that we separate out with the nodes. And the advantage of this is that I not only see those processing steps, but can access each individual processing step in a very efficient way, efficient for me for working and efficient for Fusion for the computation of the steps. And I show you this in a second. So let me say I want to refine this key a bit, and actually I think I need to refine it like in this way. And now I see, for example, that I have my key works pretty well in the center here, but not so well on the edges here, right? Here in the edges. And that's kind of expected if your original footage, let me show it to you again, has different luminance values in different areas of the footage. So it's a bit darker here in the edges than in the center. So now I could decide that I want to help my key a little bit, and a simple way to do it would be to brighten the edges. And in this flow methodology, I can bring in a brightness and contrast node, which I have here in this menu, bring it in, and I can brighten something up without actually changing the image itself, but only changing the image up here where I use it for the key. And in this way, I can mask something here and use a mask. So here are some masking tools, and I just use this Polygon Mask, create a mask like this. And if you need multiple, you can just attach them. So if I select the polygon and click again, you get a second mask, and I can get a mask here just for these edges. And probably you want to give them a bit of a soft edge and do some other modifications, but just for the idea. So now I am only brightening up the area here, and probably I'm overdoing it here just for demonstration, but can reduce this a bit, maybe like this. And this way, see on the right side, Control F to fit the viewer. On the right side, you see how I can fix my key just from this additional processing step. In the color page, this same step would be a bit more difficult because you don't have this technical level of separation of processing steps. If I have the separation like here, where the luma key itself is an individual node, I can immediately jump into any place of this node tree and do any arbitrary adjustment. And I will show this to you even further, and then you also see why this is much more powerful than a layer-based approach that you have in the edit page or in Adobe After Effects or so, because here every process step that I do can also be directly reused without any complicated workarounds. So in this case, let's say I want to build an outline around these people, just as a second idea. I will follow like the same methodology. I will add another merge, select the first one, click merge, the second one just appears downstream, add a second merge and a second background node like this, and set the color to red. And now I can kind of reuse this key. So here I have the key that identified the people, however imperfect it is at the moment. I can attach this here as well, right? And if I bring this into the viewer, I'm just adding red on top of blue. That's not what I want. I want it around the people, but not on top. And I can do this by modifying the key. And again, every node can be manipulated with almost any tool. So one way what I could do is for this key here, and let me show you the key in the alpha channel by pressing A, or you find here, you can switch from color to alpha or to individual channels up here. And now I will just manipulate this alpha channel and expand it a bit. There is a tool called Matte Control here. Sorry, here it is in the middle. Matte Control. I bring this in here, and here I can expand, I can blur. For example, I can blur, which makes, let me just zoom in on one guy here. So you see I can, let me bring this into the viewer on the left. So I can blur the matte And then I also have this expand, which kind of goes in the semi-transparent areas and expand the tools. So this is a bit like the matte finesse tools that you have in the Resolve color page. Takes a bit of getting used to, but there's a lot you can do. So let me expand a bit, maybe gamma up, and this way you can manipulate the edges with quite a lot of control. Won't go into everything, but I have now expanded this. I still have red on top of blue, but now I will do something else. I will remove the original matte from the new one, kind of subtract it. And there are, again, lots of different ways to do it. Let me just add a merge node, merge them together. Let's see what we have here. Sorry, no, let me bring it on the left side, keep the original on the right. So right now, this is just merging this on top of this, but instead I could switch this operator mode and just go for, no, not held out. I think this exclusive OR might do it. It's a bit of a funny mathematical operation, and there are other ways you can subtract and so on. But basically, it's excluding the foreground from the background. So the background is the bigger mask, and from this bigger mask, it's excluding the smaller foreground masks. But you see now something, I could reuse the same mask, do some operation on it, and practically every operation I can think of, and then use this as a new mask for a different operation. In a layer-based method, you might have to copy masks, or you may have to work with some adjustment workarounds. Here, it's just a matter when I need something, just pull it out, use it again, use it for a different purpose. Let me take this even one step further. I now want to single out an individual person, like the guy that got identified, and I will just create a simple polygon mask here, let's say around this guy, and attach this to the merge node. So now we have the red outline on top of the blue guy, but only on top of this guy. And one thing with the polygons, they are being animated by default, because they're often used for rotoscoping. So by default, you see a red dot here. It's animated where I created it. That means that if I want to follow this guy, all I need to do is reposition this polygon, and it will automatically animate in between. So it's an automatic keyframe animation just by dragging it, as long as you're getting automatically new keyframes whenever you move it. But I could also do something like jumping around to some other guy. So let's say here I have this guy animated. Let me just go one frame back and then move on someone else. Let's say on this guy, I can just move to this guy, and I'll work backwards now. Let's follow this guy for a few frames and set another keyframe by moving. So I'm following this guy, and then I'm jumping to this guy. So this way I could I could jump around a polygon and select individual people, just all coming from this mask. Now this is already the full concept for this red bluish highlighting here. I will probably refine this a little bit, and this depends how much work you want to put into it. But of course, if you need to, you can even paint in Infusion. You can paint out individual problems frame by frame if you have to. So it all depends on how much effort you want to put into. But you see a little bit of blue cast here and there and so on. So we can do further masking and further refinement, even paint if necessary. By the way, you may be thinking about the magic mask in DaVinci Resolve, which is an AI-powered tool. Feel free to give it a try with this shot if you like to. But the downside of, first of all, it's not available in Fusion, and the reason is some of these color page tools are rather rough. So in Fusion, often we need very precise masks, whereas in color, often if you just do a little bit of contrast enhancement, often the masks don't need to be so precise as we typically have them in Fusion. These AI-powered tools, they can do good previews, they can be used for color grading. Often they're not precise enough for really good compositing work. Here it would be enough, but also it would be a lot of work here. Feel free to try it, but I can tell you, getting the contrast of these pans and so on is also hard for an AI-powered tool. So you will do a lot of individual adjustment and so on, and end up probably doing the same, if not more work, by going to these tools. So sometimes a traditional keying tool is just the simplest and fastest way. I will refine this a little bit further on my own. If you're interested, look into my solution file to see exactly what I have done. And now let me go to the next step, which is this camera display overlay. Back on the edit page, and let me show you my improved version at this stage. So this is the new key, and I have animated the mask a bit more and then singled out the guy here at the end just by animating the mask. Next step, this video overlay, which I have in the adjustment clip. And because this already is an Infusion effect, I have already done some settings here and can click here on Go to Fusion, this icon here. Now this is not the clip itself, but it is an effect placed on the clip. So the edit page has different ways of interacting with Fusion. Now normally you have individual clips and then go to Fusion on the clip. Now in this case I have layered effects on the clip, just one layer here, this overlay, and this is a standalone effect which is being placed on top of a clip. If I want to adjust this one, I need to access this standalone Fusion effect. So this is what is a new feature in Resolve 17, and here I can now just click here on Go to Fusion and access this individual camera effect. And here in Fusion I have now between media in and media out, I have my effect, this video camera effect. And if you are in Fusion not very frequently, this may look a bit scary because there are like lots of elements and there are these new shape tools which are being used to render this effect. So basically there are tools that create rectangles here and masks, and they're being merged together and then they are rendered via a shape render node which was renamed here. So for example, this battery 1, if you hover over it, you see in the parentheses, you see what kind of tool this is. This is a S-render node, which is rendering vector graphics, basically. You can disable tools individually to see what's happening, and often a good idea is to go through the merge nodes and go backwards. If you need to understand a more complex flow, need to understand where something is, you have here these merge nodes, and if you disable them, you see what's happening. Or what is not happening. So this merge node, for example, I can disable the whole frame here, which is probably not what I want. I probably want, first of all, to get rid of this battery symbol. But if I disconnect this, then this merge no longer has a background. So I can just reassign this. So whatever is coming from here is going into this merge now, giving it a new background. Again, if you are entirely new to Fusion, you do want to take like a step-by-step training course, I think, where over a few hours you really walk slowly through these tools and start them using one by one. But if you're in a rush and you just need to figure out how some of these effects work, start with the merge nodes, see what happens if you disable them, see what happens if you change foreground, background. You can undo everything, of course. So this way I just got rid of my battery symbol without really looking in detail how this symbol was created. I might do some other things here. Let's see where this red dot is coming from, and I see an ellipse here and I see another merge here. So if I disable this, okay, that's the red dot. So if I wanted to animate the red dot, for example, I could not do this on the edit page. There was no feature available on the edit page that I could use for this. But here in Fusion, if I find the merge node, I can find the blend value, which is just the transparency control. And now if I want, I could animate this, and let's just let this flash a little bit. So I animate the blend in the beginning, and then let's say over, I don't know, maybe 5 frames or so, or let's just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just go with the arrow keys 5 frames forward. Let's say I want to bring it down to 0, and I can repeat this. If I go to the spline editor, I have here a lot of keyframe control. This tool is sometimes also a bit tricky, but there is this zoom to fit feature, which is very helpful if you are doing anything here. Then you have here the nodes which are being controlled. Right now this blend value. Here you have a feature show only selected tool. So these are probably the two most important features, zoom to fit here and show only selected tools, so that only the tool you currently have selected appears here for control and you don't get too many controls. And then you can animate this. For example, here press on smooth curve to get a smooth curve if that's what you want, like this. And you can also select just by selecting multiple keyframes and then let them repeat periodically. Here's, for example, set loop, and now this is being looped for all eternity, or for however long my timeline goes. And now I have a flashing dot which just keeps repeating the same animation over and over again and just keeps flashing. Let me close this. 100 different things you can do with these animation curves, and it does make sense to spend more time on them, but just one of these things that where you have much more control in Fusion compared to the edit page. Now in the edit page I couldn't even get this red dot, but even if I could, many parameters I can animate in the edit page, but in the Fusion page you just have this big viewer and you can edit your splines much more finely and have significantly more features to animate controls. But what I actually want to do now is create a progress bar, and I will use the new shape tools in Fusion to do this, and I will add them here into the flow. Actually, let me do the following. This group here is nice, but it can also sometimes be annoying. So I just right click on it and ungroup. So now I have everything separated out, and these ones here, the battery on top, I don't even need, so I can delete this and bring this all a bit up just to get myself some space. And I will now create myself a progress bar, and I do this with the shape tools, which you find in the effects library under tools shape. And these are vector tools for creating and manipulating basic shapes. They render very efficiently on the GPU, and that's also the reason why many of these default effects that you now see in Resolve 17 make use of them. So when you start exploring the pre-built effects, you will see those shape tools more and more, which is also a good reason to demonstrate them once. Let me bring in first the render node. So the render node is the node that at the end generates the image, and this is the one I want to merge in. So I bring in a merge node here and bring this render node in. But the render node needs now shapes that it can render. And in this case, let me start from a simple rectangle. Where is it? S rectangle. So all the shape nodes start with S so that you can identify them easily. Here's the rectangle. And if you need to merge stuff over among the shape nodes, you can't use the regular merge, because here we are inside our shape nodes in a kind of closed system of vector graphics, which renders efficiently as long as it's a closed system. So I can't just start blurring things, for example, because that's not a tool which is part of this vector tool. So if I want to do this, I need to do it after the render node. Inside this, before this render node, I can only use the tools that are here, which protects me from doing anything that can no longer be rendered as efficiently on the GPU. So that's a bit the concept behind this. So this rectangle is appearing here, and let me quickly adjust it so I have some on-screen controls to move it around and maybe bring it down here. I want to reduce the height significantly, and let me turn this into a bar, and I will make the viewer a bit larger now. And maybe this a bit smaller, so just so you can see everything on the screen. Let's give it a corner radius, and if you double click you can turn off the viewer controls, but you can still adjust them here. You can adjust the style, let's say give it a gray tone or something like this. Now these shape tools are very simple, but each individual tool doesn't do much. The power of these tools and why the performance is so good is because they are simple, but that also means that sometimes you have to add more. For example, this individual rectangle cannot have an outline, for example, which would be nice for drawing, but it's very simple to do it. So I would just copy it over, and merge it in. Now the merge needs a shape merge now. I can't use the normal merge because remember this is a closed system before the render node. But see what happens if I just drag the output from this rectangle over the output of this one, then I get a merge automatically. That works everywhere in Fusion, but in the shape tools I get a shape merge, which I could also grab from here. So now I have copied the rectangle, and in the copy I will change the color and let's say make it black. And in the controls, not make it solid and give it a border width. And that's how quickly I created myself a border around this bar. Let's do a little bit of animation. I wanted to make a progress bar, so I will add one more. Let me add another rectangle here. I copy it one more time, like this. And this time I make the copy white. Let's say white, or you can change the colors, of course. And I'll change the width to just get like a dot like this. And I move it here to the side, make it a bit smaller, the height as well, maybe like this. And now I want a progress which goes from the left side to the right side of the progress bar. And I do this just by replicating these dots. One dot right now, multiple dots I get with a simple duplicate node. So there's here this S duplicate, bring it in and set some copies and an offset. And it's just copying this many times with this offset. You can also rotate and do lots of other stuff, but here, very simple principle. I can duplicate like this. Actually, what I could do is I could go back here and see where my animation should start. So here is, let's say once this is over, my red outlines start flickering around. So once the transition here is done, so I could animate the progress from here with copies 0. And then when my animation is completed, which is here when this guy is identified, the green one, here I say here the progress should be 100% when the guy is found. And I could even count how many guys were selected. I don't remember, I think it was 26 or something, and could use that number of copies just so that as they are being counted, I get one more, one more, one more. Now, is that realistic? Well, maybe not, but then I can, I could get this progress bar to actually match the other animation in a red simple way. So now I have this kind of progress bar here. Okay, what do we do about the first one here? The first one is here like from the beginning, and then now I might fade out the whole bar, which I could do in this merge with the blend value. So this merge where the progress bar comes in, I could easily blend the whole thing in or out. That's one way, but let's say I want to do something inside these shapes and want to blend out something that's not directly possible. There's no blend value here in these merges, but what you can do is you can animate the color. So or the size for that matter. So you could bring the color to black and the alpha to 0 and animate this. So that would be one way to get rid of a shape without actually removing it and without blending anything in that sense. So that's one way, or another way could be to animate the size. So let's say I want this shape here on the first keyframe, or let's say a few frames before this starts. I want this to appear, and I could just place a keyframe, let's say on the width, for example, place a keyframe here on the final width, go one frame earlier just with the keyboard, one frame back, and then here set the width to 0. So that way also my shape is non-existent in the beginning and then appears as it's supposed to appear with the progress bar. Okay, this should give like a first idea why these shape tools are an interesting thing to learn and play with. I will probably do a dedicated shape tool tutorial at some point, but just to give some ideas. I will refine this. Maybe I don't like the colors here the way they are, and you can add more animations, maybe add some text animation or add some other graphics into this screen, merge more elements in, whatever you like. And I just show you what I came up with. Okay, so this is what I came up with. I just changed the colors a bit, animated, added some text at the bottom and this counter on the side. So there are, of course, lots of ways how you could design this graphic. But as the last step in this tutorial, I want to have another look at this text box. You saw there were already a few things you could do directly from the edit page to style this text and get this underlying box and so on. And there's more you can do, but there's even more that you can do in Fusion. And for a text element, you can click here on Fusion, or you can just go over to Fusion while the text is on top in your edit page timeline, and you will automatically end up here in Fusion with this text template. By the way, to navigate around here you can as well. So we could go to this Fusion clip before, or to the adjustment clip, but we could not go to the effect inside the adjustment clip. So this effect, which was placed as a standalone effect, this camera overlay, I could not reach from here. So I have to go back to the edit page to reach that effect. So now what is it that I wanted to show you? First of all, I can do some additional character level styling, which you can't do from the edit page and which you can't do directly here. But what you can do is you can, in this text box, inside this box, right click and do character level styling, which is a modifier. So a Fusion modifier is a tool that modifies another element inside Fusion. In this case, modifies the text itself. So if I go here on the modifiers, I can now do styling on individual characters. And the way how this works is that you can select characters. And if you, for example, you could select part of the text, but you are selecting the whole line. So I only want like the left side. So I have to go line by line, because if I select both, you see the whole line gets selected. So it's a bit like text selection in a text editor. But here I select these lines, and then here in this modifier, while I'm in this modifier, I can change, for example, the font, and could change this to something else. Maybe I keep the same font and just go to light. Like this, you could change just the appearance of the categories here, for example. Or of course I could take the name and make it bigger. And you see my box around automatically adjusts. If the font gets larger, it needs to adjust accordingly. So you can do changes like this. I am in the modifier. Let me go back to the text itself, go back to the shading element and give myself a bit more space in the box, because I also want to add a picture to the box. So a picture of this guy who is walking there. And for this, let me go to the shading tab, the shading element number 2, which is the box. And I can give additional vertical latitude like this, and then position it. So here you have the position, and I can position the shading element number 2, which is the box, position it upwards, and you have here this offset, and you can position it like this. Now, if you do much more advanced things with and want to animate the boxes and intersect them and punch out stuff and so on, at some point you may rather want to go for the shape tools or even for custom polygon tools to do your layouts. But as long as things are simple, one downside is now of having everything like in this shading tab is that, for example, this position doesn't automatically go to other levels. So if this box also has an outline, I'm not changing the outline automatically. So there are certain limitations here where it can get a bit more tricky if you want to do really advanced stuff. But for some simple things like just making a box bigger, you can do it right away here. And now I'll just bring in a graphic. Let me show you that as well. Could have shown it to you on the last one where I had this small head graphic. Which one was this? I think it was this one, which I added in the last screen. Yeah, so this one here, or I think I have another one. Let me use this one and just attach it here. So maybe it doesn't look so great. Either way, it's fine. I can do some photo manipulation quickly. Just maybe change the brightness and contrast here. Bring the gamma up, down. No, you see it side by side. Why? Okay, so this is just pure black. So that's a bit tricky. But we can lift it, and then if you have an alpha channel, you probably need to click on pre-divide, post-multiply, so that you are not lifting the values where there is transparency. Otherwise, just everything gets lifted. Now only the areas where it's not, where there's no transparency get impacted. So this way I can, for example, turn it into a white head. Okay, feel free to add a real photograph in, or I might actually add a 3D model, maybe just for the fun of it. But what I really wanted to show you is how versatile actually this Text Plus tool is. So already from creating these extra elements like shapes and boxes and shadows and stuff like this, over to even adjusting it for non-text elements in this case, and just a simple merge, and I get something like this. So it's not always that we need to go for the sophisticated shape tools and all the more advanced stuff if it's just a matter of making a box and a little bit of text layout. Okay, I will leave you with my final solution at the end. I hope this was a good round trip into different ideas how you can leverage Fusion, and it of course depends on your skill level how quickly and how much you do. So sometimes adjusting these text elements or adding a photo can be like super simple. Other things like working with these shape nodes does require a little bit of experience, but is not very difficult. In keying, it depends on compositing skills, so there's quite a lot that you can do. So there are a lot of different areas that I touched just to create this seemingly simple effect. But how simple it is, of course, depends on how custom you want it to be and how much you want to refine it at the end. Again, feel free to look at my solution files as well. Look at my training courses if you want a slower paced step-by-step introduction. I have a free course for you. I am doing many more advanced tutorials as well on this channel, so feel free to like and subscribe to get more from me. And thanks for watching. And here is my final effect.